Steelers Nation, listen up, because what's happening in Pittsburgh right now is absolutely massive. And if you blink, you're going to miss the entire foundation of this franchise getting flipped upside down. We're talking about seismic changes, earth-shattering moves, and decisions being made right now that will determine whether the black and gold are championship contenders or bottom dwellers for the next decade. So if you want to stay locked in on every single development coming out of the Steel City, you need to hit that subscribe button immediately. We're grinding toward 2,200 subscribers, and this community is growing every single day with the most passionate Steelers fans on the planet. Now buckle up, because what I'm about to break down for you is going to blow your mind. Let me paint the picture of where we're at right now. The Pittsburgh Steelers just experienced one of the most soul-crushing, gut-wrenching playoff defeats in franchise history. I'm talking about that absolute demolition job the Houston Texans put on them in the wild card round, 32-6. That wasn't just a loss. That was a complete and total embarrassment on national television. The offense looked completely lifeless out there. No rhythm, no explosion, no ability whatsoever to make plays when it mattered. And the defense that everyone had been hyping up all season long as this elite unit that could carry the team deep into January, they got shredded. Completely torn apart by a Houston team that frankly had no business dominating Pittsburgh like that. Now here's where it gets really interesting. In the immediate aftermath of that devastating loss, the entire Steelers universe got absolutely rocked by the news that Mike Tomlin was stepping away from his position as head coach. Now listen, I don't care where you stand on Tomlin, whether you thought it was overdue or whether you're absolutely heartbroken to see him go. The reality is, this changes absolutely everything. We're talking about a man who has been the face, the voice, the heartbeat of this organization for nearly 20 years. That kind of leadership void doesn't just affect game planning and play calling. It fundamentally alters the entire DNA of the franchise. The way players are developed, the way free agents are recruited, the way the locker room culture functions, all of that shifts dramatically when you lose a head coach who's been that embedded in the organization. But that's just the beginning of this story. And trust me when I tell you it gets so much deeper. Because while everyone was processing the Tomlin news, another bombshell was quietly building in the background. The Steelers are potentially staring at roughly 25 players hitting free agency this offseason. 25. Let that sink in for a moment. That's not roster maintenance. That's not normal turnover. That is a complete and total roster explosion. We're talking about a situation where when training camp opens next summer, the Pittsburgh Steelers might look completely unrecognizable compared to the team that took the field this past season. And sitting right smack in the middle of all this chaos, like the elephant in the room that nobody wants to acknowledge but everyone's thinking about, is the Aaron Rodgers situation. Now this is where things get really complicated, so stay with me because there's layers to this. When Pittsburgh brought in Rodgers, this was supposed to be their championship window, slamming wide open. You're bringing in a four-time league MVP, a Super Bowl champion, a quarterback who even at 42 years old possesses arm talent that 99% of humans on this planet could never even dream of having. The touch passes, the deep balls dropped into buckets 40 yards downfield, the ability to fit the football into windows that look impossible from the broadcast angle. That supernatural talent never disappeared, and Steelers fans saw glimpses of it all season long. There were stretches, entire quarters sometimes, where Rodgers looked absolutely magnificent out there. You'd watch him carve up a defense and think to yourself, yep, this is exactly why we made this move. This is the guy who's going to lead us to another Super Bowl. But here's the problem, and this is what has people inside the organization genuinely concerned. For every incredible throw Rodgers made, there were entire games where the offense felt like it was moving through concrete. Slow, predictable, completely unable to generate any kind of explosive plays down the field. And the statistics tell a story that's honestly pretty alarming when you dig into them. Rodgers' average time to throw this season clocked in at just 2.58 seconds. Now, on the surface, you might think, okay, quick release. That's efficient. That's modern football. But when you actually study the film and understand the context, you realize that number isn't reflecting offensive efficiency at all. It's reflecting limitation. The ball was coming out that fast because it absolutely had to. Rodgers' mobility, which even in his Green Bay prime was never elite, has deteriorated to the point where extending plays outside the pocket or buying extra time just isn't part of his game anymore. When your quarterback can't move and can't hold the football waiting for routes to develop downfield, what happens to your offense? It becomes almost entirely predicated on short, quick-hitting throws, checkdowns to running backs, screens and dump-offs that might pick up 5 or 6 yards but are never going to strike fear into a defensive coordinator's heart. And the proof is right there in the numbers. Both Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren ended up with over 40 receptions each coming out of the backfield. Now look, pass-catching running backs are valuable in today's NFL. Nobody's arguing otherwise. But when your running backs are among your leading receivers in terms of target volume, that tells you the vertical passing attack has completely broken down. Steelers fans felt this frustration building week after week after week. You could see it all over social media. You could hear it on every sports radio call-in show. You could feel it in the stands at Acrisure Stadium. People were watching George Pickens run beautiful routes, get separation downfield, and the football just wasn't getting there. The explosive plays that changed the complexion of a game, the 70-yard touchdowns that flip momentum in an instant, those plays were vanishing from Pittsburgh's offensive identity at an absolutely alarming rate. And when you get to the postseason and defenses realize you can't hurt them vertically, you're absolutely cooked. That's exactly what Houston did to them. Their defensive coordinator sat in the film room, watched how limited the downfield passing game had become, and basically dared Pittsburgh to beat them over the top. And Pittsburgh simply couldn't do it. The offense sputtered, stalled, and eventually collapsed completely. So now we're sitting here in the aftermath asking the question that everyone in Steelers Nation wants answered. Does Aaron Rodgers come back for another season, or is this the end of the road? And based on everything we're hearing from league sources, insiders, and people connected to the organization, it's looking more and more like Rodgers might be done. During the broadcast, immediately following that wild-card embarrassment, there were already strong hints being dropped that retirement was a legitimate possibility. Rodgers himself was unusually reflective and measured in his post-game comments, talking about gratitude and perspective, rather than talking about what needs to be fixed or how hungry he is to run it back next year. And anyone who's followed professional sports long enough knows that's usually a telltale sign. When a player starts philosophizing about the journey instead of focusing on unfinished business, you can read between those lines pretty clearly. Multiple league insiders have since reported that the expectation within NFL circles is that Rodgers may very well not suit up in 2026. Whether that means official retirement or simply a mutual parting of ways where both sides agree it's time to move on, the end result is exactly the same. The Pittsburgh Steelers could be in the market for a starting quarterback, and that opens up an absolutely fascinating Pandora's box of possibilities. The free agent market could be loaded depending on how other franchises handle their quarterback situations. Names like Tua Tagovailoa, Kyler Murray, Geno Smith, even Kirk Cousins have been floated as potential options. Each one brings completely different skill sets, completely different risk profiles, and completely different implications for how this offense would be structured. Or maybe, just maybe, Pittsburgh decides this is the offseason to finally invest a premium draft pick in a young franchise quarterback. That's the kind of decision that defines a general manager's entire tenure. That's the kind of choice that separates rebuilding cycles from championship windows. And whoever the next head coach is, whoever walks through those doors at Steelers headquarters and takes over this team, their fingerprints are going to be all over that quarterback decision. But the Rodgers situation isn't the only domino that's starting to wobble right now. Not even close. Let me walk you through some of the other names whose futures in Pittsburgh are looking extremely shaky. Start with Cole Holcomb at linebacker. When healthy, Holcomb is a solid football player. He's physical, he understands gap integrity in the run game, and he can be a dependable tackler. But the key phrase there is when healthy, because Holcomb has been battling injuries. And at some point, the organization has to ask itself whether it makes sense to keep investing snaps and roster spots in a player who can't stay on the field, especially when they already have a young, hungry replacement waiting in the wings. Peyton Wilson, the third-round pick from the 2024 draft, has been flashing serious potential in limited opportunities. He's got the athleticism, the instincts, and the motor that you absolutely covet in a modern NFL linebacker. With a new coaching staff coming in and a presumably fresh philosophy on defense, this could be the perfect opportunity to hand the keys to Wilson and let him develop into a full-time starter. If that happens, Holcomb becomes expendable, and in a salary cap league where every dollar matters, expendable veterans get moved on from. That's just the harsh reality of the business. Then you slide over to the secondary and look at the Jabril Peppers situation, which honestly has been pretty disappointing. Peppers is undeniably talented, and when Pittsburgh brought him in, there were legitimate expectations that he'd be a difference maker in the secondary. But the reality of what actually transpired during the season tells a completely different story. When the Steelers brought in Kyle Duggar mid-season, it was supposed to create healthy competition and add depth at the safety position.